Three massive things happened this week. BlackRock CEO just told the world he's going to control nearly every AI data center in the United States and called American citizens who push back domestic terrorists. The Clarity Act passed out of committee, heads to the Senate, but the language that protected open source developers stripped out last minute for votes that didn't even materialize. And here's a big one that'll rattle your sphincter. The odds of a rate cut just collapsed to 27%. Stagflation is on the menu. The new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, just told you QE is over. Now, almost nobody is connecting these three things. They look like separate news. They are the same news. The biggest Ponzi scheme in history, fiat, is in its terminal phase. And the system that's been printing your future away for 50 years is building its replacement right now, and it is terrifying. My goal today is to show you the three pillars of that replacement, walk you through what they're actually building, and by the end, you'll understand why Fidelity says Bitcoin to $1 billion by 2038. DCA engaged, baby. Bleach your hair, blast that PM5K, because this is what it looks like when systems collide. We got a big show today. Sunday. Look, a system is what it does. Once you're in the system, you do what the system does. And this system, that system, as you can see here, is cooked. So, they're building the replacement. Their replacement. Cyborg Larry Fink wants every asset on one programmable blockchain. The banks want every line of crypto code to require a permission slip. The Fed wants to print so much money, your eyes will bleed, and then call you a terrorist when you opt out. Am I getting this right?
Terrorists, jihadis.
They're building the cage. Bitcoin has already built the exit, and it's getting more powerful by the day. Today, I'm going to lay out the three pillars of the cage: control, capture, collapse. And after each one, I'm going to tell you the same thing, because it's the only thing that matters. Bitcoin, like Larry David, doesn't give a f***. BlackRock isn't financing AI. They're financing the cage. Pillar 1, control. Watch how casually Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful or whatever the hell, lies on one of the most viewed shows on the internet.
Take 40,000 acres in Utah and make it possible for the government to know where you are at all times and what you're thinking, listening to you on your phone. Like, we have that.
You have to choose the less of two evils in your scenario. And I'm telling you, what you should do is say, I want Kevin O'Leary to succeed. I want him to beat the Chinese in compute power. Then use the laws of the United States to make sure that you keep that compute power in check. To not have it available, to put down my shovel. I don't think people want me to do that. Even the people in Box Elder, the majority of them want me to hold my shovel and start digging.
There was a referendum among citizens?
3-0. The commissioners of the county said, we want to be
three people voted. The people of the county.
They're elected officials. That's how you do it.
How hard is it for Kevin O'Leary and Amazon and Microsoft and Google to subvert three county commissioners in rural Utah?
Tucker, they asked us to come. They asked us to bring $15 billion. There's no other way to do it.
Google and Kevin O'Leary got three county commissioners in rural Utah on their side. Good work.
Cool story. The U.S. already had 5,381 data centers. China has 449. We have 12 times more than the country we're supposedly competing with. So it's not about China. What is it about?
But consider the concern. So if you're rolling out what they're telling you, and clearly they believe, is the single greatest technological change in the history of human life on this planet, it's the biggest thing that's ever happened, ever, then you think one of your main concerns would be, well, does this change the relationship of the powerless to the powerful, the relationship of the citizen to the state, for example? One of your concerns would be, how do we do this and bring about the prosperity that it promises without totally eliminating human rights, making people slaves? Because we're against slavery, right? Aren't we against slavery? We were. How do we do that? But that doesn't seem to be Larry Fink's main concern. His main concern is, how do we protect our investment? this infrastructure, these buildings, these data centers. Someone could drone them. Someone could drone them. Now, who? Foreign actors? Hezbollah? Hamas? No, just people. Larry Fink is concerned that ordinary American citizens, as he just said, will use $3,000 drones to destroy these billion-dollar investments. Why would he be worried about that? We've had electricity for over 100 years. There are 11,000 power plants in the
years. Tucker said the quiet part out loud. The elites are terrified of ordinary citizens. Why? Because they know what they're building. Watch Fink himself.
But now, because of drone warfare, we have to relook at all forms of security. And the need for rebuilding the GCC region, to rebuild it so that it's going to be in a position where it's not going to be obstructed by drone warfare. So many more things are going to have to be underground. But even here in the United States, if we're going to be building, let's say, these 1 gigawatt data centers, how do we make sure we're not protecting those $50 billion, $75 billion investments? We have to relook at everything because of the role of drone warfare. Right now, we're looking at it internationally, but one of my concerns is, could it be a domestic terrorism using a $3,000 drone? So all of these things are actually opportunities, not problems. It's going to require, as we said, trillions of dollars of capital. Governments cannot build these out alone. They don't have the wherewithal. And two, their deficits are started to be mounting. And we spend too little time talking about the U.S. deficits and other countries' deficits. So this is all going to be the role of private sector.
He's calling you a terrorist before you've done anything. A week after the 2026 counterterrorism strategy expanded the definition of domestic terrorism. Right on time, right on script. And it gets worse. The U.S. Army just signed off on 50-year leases at Fort Bliss and Dugway Proving Ground, hyperscale data centers on military bases built by Carlyle, KKR, and Global Infrastructure Partners. Guess who owns Global Infrastructure Partners? BlackRock. The Army's not getting paid in cash. They're getting paid in compute. The same compute that runs Palantir's Maven AI, the targeting system that, according to Military Times, generated coordinates that bombed a primary school in Iran, most of them children. And now Fink wants all of it on one blockchain.
I think the movement towards tokenization, decimalization is necessary. It's ironic that we see two emerging countries leading the world in in the tokenization and digitization of their currency. That's Brazil and India. I think we need to move very rapidly to doing that. We would be reducing fees. We would do more democratization by reducing more fees if we had all investments on a tokenized platform that you could move from a tokenized money market fund to equities and bonds and back and forth. We have one common blockchain. We will, we can reduce corruption. So I would argue that yes, we have more dependencies on maybe one blockchain, which we could all talk about. But that being said, the activities are probably processed and more secure than ever.
One blockchain, programmable, fractionalized, instantly transferable, translation. A kill switch on every dollar you own. That's the cage. They're not financing AI. They are financing the cage. And they want you to think you're a terrorist for noticing. Bitcoin doesn't give a Speaking of cages, most of you watching right now have your Bitcoin sitting on an exchange. You don't own it. You have an IOU. And when Fink's blockchain goes live and they freeze your account because you reposted the wrong meme, you're going to wish you self-custodied. The Bitcoin way exists because self-custody shouldn't require a computer science degree. White glove onboarding, they walk you through your hardware wallet setup, multi-sig, inheritance planning, the whole stack. So when the system melts down, your stack doesn't melt with it. If you don't hold your keys, you don't hold your Bitcoin. Book your free consultation today. Click that link in the description. Scan the QR, head over to the Bitcoin Way today, and stop renting your freedom. The Clarity Act is not clear, it's a leash. Pillar 2, capture. The Clarity Act passed. Charles Payne changed his profile picture to an American flag Bitcoin. Everyone's celebrating. Was it really a win? Let's check the tape. Let's go to Bitcoin Senator Cynthia Lummis and see what she's been up to.
This is some competition for them. They view it as competition that will hurt their ability to sustain the deposits they need to make loans. I disagree with that. They want changes that actually would go back to the Genius Act we passed last summer and make changes to it. I think that they should embrace digital assets. It's going to be part of the financial products they can offer in the future. We're going to have a digital dollar, a digital Bitcoin, digital alternative coins. It's going to be a new financial landscape, and I'd like to see the traditional banking industry embrace it instead of fight it. Let me go through a couple of the things that we have done to strengthen and address some of the issues that have been raised. Regard to anti-money laundering and illicit finance, it creates risk-based exam standards. It expands Treasury's special measure authority to act swiftly against foreign money laundering. It creates studies on mixers and tumblers. It requires annual Treasury reports on foreign jurisdictions' compliance with U.S. AML CFT standards. It requires recurring Treasury reports on offshore stablecoins. It requires mandatory educational materials on digital asset risks, insider resale restrictions to prevent pump and dump schemes. It has timely disclosure requirements, broker-deal insolvency disclosures, a federal regulatory floor for crypto kiosks. This is very important. This has been a problem in my state. Tokenized securities remain securities under SEC jurisdiction. FTC authority over unfair or deceptive practices. $30 million per year through 2031 for FinCEN. With regard to fraud and AML provisions, temporary holds for suspicious activities and preventing those who place the holds from having private causes of action. It applies BSA regulation to digital asset brokers, dealers, and exchanges. This list goes on and on. This is a pro-law enforcement bill.
That's why they hate it. Bitcoin is winning. The banks know it. They're losing. So they fought for their lives. And they got their consolation prize. Last-minute negotiation, Banking Committee Republicans and Democrats stripped Section 301. That was the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, the language that protected non-custodial software developers from being treated like money transmitters. The direct response to the Tornado Cash and Samurai Wallet prosecutions, gone. Traded away for bipartisan votes that did not materialize. Mark Warner still voted no. They sold the developers for nothing. Oh, and our girl, Liz Warren? Hold on. Vintage! Liz crawled out of her cave, slithered into Congress, and proposed 40 amendments against this bill. Roll it.
It pushes more of the market into crypto and removes protections for investors and removes recourse for victims. That is the wrong direction to go in.
All righty.
When this blows up at the economy, I hope everybody remembers.
Hey, Liz, Bitcoin doesn't give a It's winning. You're losing, but make no mistake, a war is being fought right now, a last-ditch effort for any semblance of relevance before they go extinct. The Clarity Act is making things clear, actually. All right, the banks hate you and the state hates the Fourth Amendment. I don't even think they know it exists. Oh, and here's the dirty secret about every other Bitcoin-backed lender. They're lending your collateral out. They're rehypothecating it. They're playing the same fractional reserve game the banks play with your Bitcoin. And when the music stops, your stack is gone. Ledn doesn't do that. Their custodied loan product means your Bitcoin sits in cold storage. Never lent out, never touched. That's the Satoshi Standard. 8 years, $10 billion in origination, zero customer Bitcoin lost. Lowest rates in the industry, no hidden fees, no fine print, auto top up so you never get liquidated by a wick. Zero prepayment penalties, paid off whenever you want. Don't sell your Bitcoin to buy a house, a car, a business. Borrow against it. Keep your stack. Scan the QR or click the link in the description and head over to Ledn.io today. The new Fed chair just bet against easy money. Everything must reprice. Pillar 3, collapse. Utter destruction. The macro picture is absolutely cooked. Rate cut odds for 2026, 27%. There is now a higher chance the Fed hikes than cuts by December. Inflation is back in full swing. Ray Dalio, live on CNBC, said the quiet part.
Almost anybody who's objective, they would say, certainly you would not cut interest rates now, okay? You will lose your credibility. The Federal Reserve would lose its credibility, particularly now, almost at any time. And so I would say, but beyond that, it's not the right way to have monetary policy, given all things considered.
Why? He should wait till when?
Well, you have a dual mandate, right? You're in a stagflationary period. We're in a stagflationary period.
You think we are?
We are certainly in a stagflationary period. Now, how that transpires has a lot of parts to it, but we certainly are in that. And if you look at monetary policies by other countries, you're not going to see them cutting. Okay, so whatever your benchmarks are, you're not going to be inclined to cut the monetary policies, not with today's information.
Stagflation, the one thing every central banker on earth told you couldn't happen again after 1979. Well, here we are. Look at the bond market. 30-year yield, 5%, 20-year, 5%, 10-year, 4.5%. Every maturity rising together. The government is running a $2 trillion annual deficit and borrowing more every day to fund a war for no reason. Meanwhile, the UK 30-year just hit 5%, highest since 2008. Japan's wholesale inflation came in at 4.9%, nearly double the forecast. The 30-year Japanese government bond just hit 4%, a record for a country that spent 3 decades in deflation. A former JP Morgan Japan head said the countdown to yen worthlessness has begun. Stocks are at all-time highs because AI earnings are real. Bond yields are at multi-decade highs because the debt is real. Both cannot be right. But hey, don't worry. The president is deeply concerned about your financial situation. I'm sure he's working on fixing it. Oh, wait!
To what extent are Americans' financial situations motivating you to make a deal?
Not even a little bit. The only thing that matters when I'm talking about Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all.
Gas prices in America are still high, painfully high.
They're going to drop like a rock as soon as
it's over.
Yeah.
Painfully high, though, now, and could be creeping higher before it's done.
Excuse me, lower than Biden, and much lower than people thought they'd be.
This inflation number is going up. You're right. It's much lower than President Biden's was, but it's going up under you. The numbers are. You can imagine Democrats and political pundits jumped all over this statement that you made the other day. You were asked when you were leaving.
To what extent are Americans' financial situations motivating you to make a deal?
Not even a little bit. The only thing that matters when I'm talking about Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. We cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all.
That's right. That's a perfect statement. I'd make it again.
You can imagine how many people stop the soundbite I don't think about America's financial situation. So what's your response to that framework?
It's very simple. When people hear me say it, everybody agrees. Short-term pain. It's going to be short-term pain. But the pain is much less than people thought. Because people thought that the oil would go up to $250. You know, it was $99 yesterday, $99 a barrel. I thought it might go up to $200. I was okay with that. Not that I wanted it. but you cannot let them have a nuclear weapon. They will use it on us. They'll start off with Israel, wipe it out, the Middle East, wipe it out. It'll go to Europe. You know, they have a missile that goes to Europe. You saw that, okay? They have a missile that goes to Europe. I have done Europe a very big favor. When you tell somebody you're going to have to pay a little more, not that much more, a little more for gasoline for a very short period of time, because we want to stop the threat of being blown to pieces by a lunatic, by a crazy person, and they are crazy, using nuclear weapons, everybody says that's fine. And that question was a fake question, and they didn't put my full answer. I totally care. Look, I inherited high prices, and they came in with the word affordability. My first press conference, 2 days in, and Biden didn't do press conferences. He'd go for years without doing, because he was incapable of doing it. He was an incompetent person. But my first question was about eggs. Eggs have quadrupled. What are you going to do? I said, eggs? Tell me about eggs. Tell me about the problem. Eggs have gone up 4 times. He said, I'll take care of it. By the way, I did take care of it. But they came up with a word, because they are good. They're rotten with policy. They're horrible politicians. In many cases, we have a new name. They're Democrats. I call them Democrats. Not Democrats, they're Democrats. A lot of low IQ people. You have Ilhan Omar saying World War XI. She said she was referring to World War II. She said World War XI. These people are destroying our country, and we have to stop it. You know, President...
Oh, cool. Glad. Thanks. Nice. We cleared it up. Now into this dumpster fire walks a brand new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, who just bet against the entire Powell playbook.
Agenda for reform that won't make matters worse.
Yes, well, this might upset part of your audience, Peter. So this is a trigger warning. This is what people like you and I do on campus. I believe this administration inherited a mess, a fiscal and monetary mess. And it is incumbent on the administration to get out of it. No one said it would be easy. We didn't get into this mess overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. To make the numbers you said somewhat easier, I think, to understand, we were paying about $1 billion in interest expense every day, the day before COVID. We're now paying more than $3 billion per day in interest expense. None of that's going to strengthen the military or help the least well-off among us. That is being squandered away. So what do I suggest? As you pointed out, and as you and I have discussed, but I'm not sure the economics profession believes this, there are 2 monetary policy instruments. One is setting of interest rates, right, and the other is this money we keep talking about. We call it QE, we call it the central bank's balance sheet. If we would run the printing press a little quieter, we could then have lower interest rates. Because what we're doing right now is we have all this money that's being flooded into the system, which causes inflation to be above target. That's this $7 trillion balance sheet you're talking about, an order of magnitude larger than when I joined the Fed. And at the same time, you have another monetary policy instrument, and that's interest rates. They don't work perfectly together. They're not perfect substitutes for each, but they're both monetary policy. And too many that are in the central banking business say, no, 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 that balance sheet has nothing to do with monetary policy. Well, if it did when you were growing it, it should have something to do with the conduct of monetary policy when it's going the other direction. I think we have to be honest about these 2 instruments. And because I believe that growing the real economy is the more important piece for revenue, for fairness, for efficiency and growth, because you have higher inflation caused by the bigger balance sheet, we want to shrink that. We can't do it overnight. We want the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve to come to some accord, much like the Treasury and the Federal Reserve came to in 1951. Who's responsible for what? Who's going to be managing interest rates? The Federal Reserve. Who's going to be handling fiscal accounts? The Treasury Department. We have blurred these lines about who's responsible. And when a president comes to power, his Treasury Secretary should be responsible for as the fiscal authority, instead of blurring that over to the Federal Reserve, which only brings politics to the Federal Reserve, and I would say interrupts their normal, ordinary course. In my judgment, we should be shrinking the central bank balance sheet, taking the Fed out of these markets unless and until there's a crisis, And in so doing, you'd have less inflation that way. You and I might call that a practical monetarism. I think that's what our intellectual heirs might be thinking about, intellectual teachers might be thinking about. And in so doing, you might actually be able to pull off lower interest rates, which matter more to the real economy than the balance sheet.
All right.
Powell printed. Warsh wants to stop. Powell expanded the balance sheet to $6.7 trillion. Warsh just told you that the number has to come down. Less liquidity, higher rates for longer, risk assets reprice. The market has been betting on easy money. The new Fed chair just bet against it. And the Bank of Japan's only exit from $9 trillion in debt is to inflate it away. When the carry trade unwinds, and it will, Bitcoin doesn't give a which currency broke first. They're going to print so much money it'll make our eyes bleed. So put it all together. Control. BlackRock owns the AI infrastructure, and the government calls you a terrorist if you push back or question it. Capture. The Clarity Act sells out the developers to give the banks a leash. Collapse. The bond market is screaming. Stagflation is here, and the new Fed chair just told you QE is dead. 3 news stories, 1 event. The Ponzi is in its terminal phase, and the parasites running it are building the replacement, a programmable, surveilled, kill-switched financial cage. That's what the data centers are for. That's what the Clarity Act softens people up for. That's what the next round of money printing pays for. But here's the thing they didn't account for. Bitcoin already exists. The replacement they're terrified of is already built. It's being built better. Now, right now, by people, by us. Block by block, block height, climbing every 10 minutes. They can't stop it. They can't seize it. They can't print more of it.
The person in charge doesn't really matter. And I'm talking about in the U.S. context. Obviously, it's a big world out there, and there's 7 billion, 8 billion people, so we're really only talking about 400 million. But at the end of the day, if you talk about in the United States, Bitcoin had the biggest price appreciation under a Democratic president, President Obama. Then there was Trump, then there was Biden, and there was the second coming of Trump. And obviously, Trump's second time around, the rhetoric changed in terms of the crypto rhetoric around, okay, enforcement agencies, acceptance, and all these sorts of things. But at the end of the day, like, Bitcoin went from 0 to something, big something, with no regulatory clarity, with no support. The only thing that Trump has actually done in terms of bills signed is, I think, the Genius Act, right? That was signed in July of 2025. So we've gotten to an all-time high, at least in the United States context, with absolutely no clarity, absolutely no regulation, absolutely no support. So that isn't the constraining factor in the price. And I think that the price performance of Trump post-inauguration in the second term has proven that. The price is down something like, 20%. So in my mind, this proves that Bitcoin's value has nothing to do with regulations or the lack thereof or crypto regulation. It has everything to do with how much fiat liquidity is there in the system, and Bitcoin will respond to that. And so it doesn't matter. It's nice that Trump says nice things about crypto, and he shows up to the events, and obviously takes people's money for the campaign donations, and the SEC and the CFTC, have wound down certain enforcement actions against crypto people. Like, great, but again, at the end of the day, the price action says it doesn't matter either way. And to the point about the previous administration, if you go back before the FTX implosion in 2022, Gary Gensler was a much different person in terms of at least a rhetorical stance towards crypto. It was a lot more positive. Sam Bankman-Fried was about to get almost every single license on offer in the United States. It was only because he basically bribed all these politicians with hundreds of millions of dollars. Then turned out that he just stole that money from his customers, that the Democratic Party had to completely switch their tack on crypto because they looked so compromised. And so all of a sudden it was, this is the most evil thing in the world. But, Elizabeth Warren and all these other motherfuckers took Sam's money and were perfectly willing to, expound on the benefits of crypto as long as they were getting campaign donations. And so I think this whole, people need to remember actually what happened. It's not that the Democrats are against crypto. It's that they looked compromised because their poster child was a thief. We found it was found out to be a thief, and therefore, in order to save their political skin, they had to turn a different tack to become their party of anti-crypto. And so things can change, right? And so I think people need to understand that politics is fickle. The priorities of politicians change all the time. It's all about compromise and horse trading. And so there is no like demonstrative like this party is great for crypto and this party is bad for crypto. Things will change, and so I think people need to keep that in mind.
I think that's Arthur. This is it's. I talked to a lot of people. That's a very unique take and that perspective, and it's good to go back and look at the history, and that makes perfect sense, right? You know, they didn't really pay attention to it before FTX. They're very, you know, like you said, their poster child ended up being a thief, and then that kind of forced their hand. That's the first time hearing that perspective, so I really appreciate that. What is your take on the Clarity Act? Because it's all the buzz right now. That's what everybody's talking about. They released the pages apparently 2 days ago in the dead of night at like midnight. Is it significant? Is it gonna be bullish for the price? Does it even matter? Does Bitcoin even need regulation? You were talking about that earlier. Bitcoin number went up regardless of the administration, regardless of the political party, regardless of the regulatory environment. Is it a big deal, the Clarity Act passing?
I think for the broader crypto ecosystem, the Clarity Act pass or doesn't pass has no effect on the price, no effect on the trajectory of Bitcoin. However, if you are a founder or builder inside the United States and your product or service is predicated on access to that market, or you are a CEO of a centralized exchange like Jeremy Allaire or Brian Armstrong, this is a very important bill for you, right? Because this is going to define how you interact within the system against the banks and other institutions in the financial services sector, and what that means for crypto. Now, obviously, the mainstream media is very Western focused, U.S. focused, and so they're blaring out all this nonsense about the Clarity Act this and the Clarity Act that. But in general, no, it will have no effect on the price, whether it passes or it doesn't pass. But again, if that is your market, if the United States market is what you care about in terms of, crypto financial services, yes, it is very important. I have not read the bill. I will not read the bill. It has no effect on crypto. From my own perspective, if it does end up passing both the House and the Senate, I hope Trump vetoes it because it's not necessary. It's just adding more complexity, red tape, legal costs, all these sorts of things that have nothing to do with crypto, has nothing to do with open source tech development. If anything, it's going to hamper open source tech development inside the United States. But again, it'll have no impact on the price either way.
Arthur sees it. Bitcoin went from zero to a $4 trillion asset with no regulatory clarity, no support. Why? Because Bitcoin doesn't run on permission slips. It runs on math. And when they print to inflate money, 9 trillion in Japanese debt and 2 trillion in US deficits a year, Bitcoin reprices. Arthur's target 6x in 2 years, and that's being bearish. Fidelity says $1 billion per coin by 2038. That's not a moon boy take. That's an asset manager with over 5 trillion under management telling you what the math looks like when the cage gets built and the exits get crowded. So if all this has you down, sleep well tonight. Short-term noise, short-term catastrophe. The replacement they're building, it's terrifying, but the exit is already built. And it's already winning. Speaking of off-grid, when the cage closes and the grid goes down, and look around, it's not a question of like if anymore. How are you broadcasting your transactions? How are you reaching the network? SAT123 is the answer. Satellite Bitcoin gear, off-grid kits, sovereign communications. The hardware that keeps you connected to the network when the network they control goes down. Built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Use code SIMPLY to get you 15% off at the checkout at SAT123. Link in the description. Scan the QR. Don't be the guy who self-custodies and can't transact. All right. Last thing. We've been building something in the background. Top secret. Something we've been working on for months that's going to change what this channel does for you and what we deliver and how you survive what's coming. I can't tell you what it is yet. Not today. But I can tell you this. If you ain't first, you're last. Scan the QR code on screen. Click the link in the description. Sign up to the early list. Be the first to know what Simply Bitcoin has been building and what's about to drop. You don't want to find out about this from someone else. Bitcoin doesn't give a fuck, but you should. That's the show. Control, capture, collapse. 3 pillars, 1 Ponzi, 1 exit. The system does what it does, and what this one does is print, surveil, and lie. Bitcoin's only job? Math. Smash the like, subscribe, hit the bell, give us a pamp, drop your favorite kill shot from today's show in the comments. We'll be reading them. The war is here. Bleach your hair, blast that PM5K. This is what it feels like when systems collide, baby. Sunday. Hey, love you guys. Catch you next time. Peace.
If you prefer to go down with the ship, you.